Well, here we are live at an unusual time, 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 6 o'clock Pacific Time, and it's the.
Doesn't this remind you of some of those game shows who, they're on at a specific time during the daytime, and then they said, and tune in tomorrow night for the nighttime version of
Right,
the late
exactly.
night version of the Joe and Joe show.
Exactly. Well, we don't have our own Johnny Olson, nor do we have our own Don Pardo. So we just kind of announce ourselves and appreciate the audience's indulgence tonight for waiting an extra couple of hours. Thank you very much, and it's nice to see a very nice crowd for 9 o'clock at night when they could be watching for the results of the Iowa caucuses, which are just so darn exciting. But other than that, it's been a pretty good day. Let me just off the top remind everybody tomorrow. I will be at the Holbrook Library. I'm sorry, at the Sachem Library in Holbrook, New York. I should know that. I've been living here for 30 years. The Sachem Library in Holbrook, New York, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And we'll be doing an hour of weather. So by all means, come on out. It is free. It's at Exit 61 on the LIE. I know most people are working during the day, but you never know. And if some kids from high school or college, if weather is your thing, stop on by and we'll caucus. How's that?
Sure.
Does that work for you?
Well, it works. It works in one regard. I'm happy that you're doing one, but unfortunately, Exit 61 is a little bit of a haul for me. So
Yeah,
I
I didn't expect you to drive all the way here to Exit 61. I get that.
I do have friends, however, who live in and around Selden, and for goodness sake, I'm going to have a wedding. My son's getting married at the
At the
Watermill,
Watermill Inn, yeah.
and so there are reasons on occasion for me to have to go out there, and I guess I have to go out there on the day of the wedding, right?
You think? What church
Oh,
is
I'm going to
what
get.
church is the wedding at?
I have
Oh,
no.
so Our Lady of We're Not Telling You.
Well, you know how it is, Joe. The bride always gets everything they want. When I
Right.
when
You
I got
just
married,
you just show up.
when I got married,
I don't see a problem with that.
I was a member for many years when I lived in Throgs Neck of St. Benedict's Parish, but no, we had to get married at wife's parent parish, which was out
Well,
in New
that's
Hampshire.
understandable.
Lutheran. She's Lutheran. I'm Catholic,
Right.
but it doesn't matter. I once told my one of the priests from my church, Father Norton, who's still there, I might add. He's Monsignor Norton,
Hey, Norton.
and he and he asked me, he said, may I ask, was it a situation where, because I told him that we brought our children up Lutheran, whereas I'm Catholic, and he was questioning me about that. And I said, Father, here's the thing. It's just, to me, it's like baseball. I said, in the American League, you got the designated hitter. In the National League, you don't.
Right.
There are various rules
You
in the
all
minor
go into
league.
the. You can only hope we're all going to the same
We're
place.
all going to the same place at the end of the year, the World Series and whatever. And, we're all there for the same team. So how did we
Correct.
get into this? This is a
I don't know. You brought this up.
theological discussion about weather.
All right. Okay. Well, then let's talk weather. So, this has not happened since 2015, Mr. Rayo. That's your clue for tonight. That's the only clue
What is
I'm
this?
giving you.
What is
This
this? Scott
is
Miller Jeopardy again?
this has not happened since 2015.
Oh dear.
All right, so I will put up the map. I'll put up the map, and I will. This will be your only clue. Okay, we'll put up the watches and warnings map, and that's all there is. That's all I'm gonna say.
Well, it must have something to do with
This
the
has not happened in this city since 2015.
Dallas, Texas snow.
Right, it has not snowed in Dallas, Texas since 2015,
Okay.
and their forecast, at least from the digital database from the Weather Service, is for a coating to an inch in Dallas Fort Worth if it
Okay.
happens. Although there are some substantial numbers in terms of snow amounts that are expected north and west of there, like up at in Wichita Falls That's not to be confused, by the way, with Chickasaw Falls.
Okay.
Do you know where Chickasaw Falls comes from?
No,
It's a Lost in Space episode.
you're kidding me.
It's a
Is that?
Lost in Space
Oh, wait a
episode.
minute. Was that when they went back into when
Yeah,
Will went back to the Earth?
right.
So
And they went back in time,
yeah,
and Dr. Smith claimed that he was the big cheese from Chickasaw Falls, of all places.
these were the black and white episodes, I guess, right?
No, no, this was the color one. This was in the last season when they
Oh,
went back to Earth, but they wound up going back like 50 years earlier.
right.
Not that that's ever been done, uh, you know. But no matter. Yeah, that's different than Wichita Falls and places like Abilene, Lubbock, Midland, Odessa. Those areas all going to probably wind up with a 3 to 6 inch snowfall, which
That's
isn't
the one
too,
with
which isn't too shabby.
that's the one where June Lockhart is trying to figure out how to use a petticoat junction type phone, right?
Something
That's right.
like that.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And they were called Voltones or something.
Yeah.
So that's the extent of it. I mean, why not? If it's not going to snow here, you're going to find snows probably happening in places that don't see it that often. And when we pull up the snow map and get it a little bit wider, folks, you can see this is, by the way, through Thursday evening. So this covers a number of different systems. And tonight's big winners are going on up in the Pacific Northwest and in the northern Rockies, where we're still seeing some big snow amounts, and also across Colorado. Wyoming got pounded earlier with some 1 foot plus snows in some places, and now that storm system is dropping southward, so you're seeing snows through Colorado on the order of 4 to 8 inches from west of Denver. And then, of course, when you get into Wednesday, you're going to get into this snow that you see across parts of North Texas and through Oklahoma and back up through Missouri, Chicago, on northward from there. So this storm seems to be playing out for the southern plains, the middle Mississippi Valley, parts of the lower Great Lakes, and to a limited extent the Northeast. There are some, snow amounts that are going to be, this is nothing, no big deal really for upstate New York and northern New England, mostly well north of I-90 on the order of 3, 4, or 5 inches. I'm not really overly enthused by what's happening here late this week, Joe. And I also think that when you consider the fact that here we are on February 3rd, and I mean, you can't even buy a flake. You can't even buy a snow shower. That's it. It's a pretty sad weather pattern that we're sitting in right now.
Well, I will give you one bit of credit here for the fact that yesterday at Central Park there were some snow showers that were reported, and that led to an observation of a trace of snow.
Oh,
So
they got the trace, so
so far,
so zero is off the table.
zeros off the table. They were actually had a trace of snow yesterday, so that means that this winter, or at least this February, has at least a trace going into the record book. Whether or not we can add to that maybe later in the week or later in the month, that's still yet to be seen.
Well, ice counts as well. And with this next weather system coming for late Wednesday night, early Thursday, it looks like there might be some ice issues. I don't see this as a huge deal in terms of ice accretion. We're talking about up to about a tenth of an inch of ice across Pennsylvania, mainly north of Route 78, northern New Jersey, north and west of north of Route 78, and let's say west of 287. For the Hudson Valley, some accretion amounts of 4 or 5 hundredths being forecast, and then continuing over into Connecticut and through Massachusetts. I don't know, Joe. There's a limited amount of cold air here to work with. I'm not overly, I'm not too worried about. I've seen a couple of things about ice storms and that kind of thing. I'm just not seeing it with this one. There'll be a crash in temperatures to an extent, but the cold air may pull out almost as fast as it comes in.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a major event. Actually, the interesting thing is the timing. If the cold air is not as bullish as some models show, we may see this precipitation in the form of a wintry mix, at least in the inland locations, through about midday on Thursday. Then again, if it's cold and dry on Wednesday, it may actually push some of the cloud cover that'll be over our area on Wednesday far
Further
enough
south.
out for some late day sun on Wednesday.
Wouldn't be a shocker. Wouldn't be the first time. It wouldn't be a shocker. I also don't think that they got earlier today. The Weather Service on their digital forecast has had twos down to about New York City, and I just thought that was way overdone. I mean, I'm thinking, if you want to even make the argument here that there's going to be a little bit of snow on the front end, and I think there's a fairly good chance that there won't be. That even a coating to an inch is too high for some of these areas. I mean, they're pushing numbers of 2 to 3 inches up for Poughkeepsie on north with the Hudson Valley. I don't know, Joe. There's not a whole lot. The cold air is so shallow. It really is. There's a point at a certain point late Wednesday where the cold air kind of advects a little bit, to the south, and the 0 to green line at 850 gets down into New Jersey for a little while, but then it comes buckling right back up on Thursday. I don't know. I think this is just a little overdone on the snow side.
I think so too. I don't really see all that much. But then again, we've had so little to work with so far this winter that even a cheap throw like this could be fairly significant for Wednesday into Thursday. And it would not be surprising to me, Joe. We haven't really had all that much up here in the Hudson Valley. It would not be surprising if parts of our area here in the Hudson Valley had either school delays or, Lord only knows, even maybe a school closure or two on Thursday. Sticking my neck way out in advance here, but again, there really hasn't been all that much up here to be concerned with in terms of ice and snow.
They got days to burn this winter. Bobby Livingsworth got an inch of snow yesterday. This was another example yesterday uh, of a warm front, an arm. We had that a couple of weeks ago, if you
Right.
remember, on that Saturday. Now we had it again. There seems to be this thing about it. There's almost a sort of convective nature to whatever snow we've gotten this winter, which is a little unusual.
And don't be surprised if maybe Thursday night or early on Friday, you speak of convection, that we may actually hear a rumble or two of thunder, see a flash of lightning, because that's a very potent cold front that's working its way through, and a rather intense storm that it's attached to, passing not too far to our north and west Thursday night into early Friday morning, bringing us probably a good dose of showery rains and, again, maybe a rumble or two here and there.
Yeah, SPC's actually got not for here, but for the southeast part of the United States on their day. Yesterday was the day 5. Today's the day 4. It's got a 15% risk, which is pretty high for them to show it up on the day 4 forecast.
Right.
We should also mention too, because Steve Lapointe pointing out there were a few elevated areas in northwest New Jersey. You had to go up over 1,000 feet. That got a couple of inches of wet snow. Same for parts of northeastern Pennsylvania. But you know what? It's that kind of a winter this year where whatever happens is few and far between. And they, I guess for snow lovers in those areas, they got a little lucky. But just as fast as they had it, it disappeared because temperatures today topped out in the 50s and 60s, which
Right.
was nice. We had a really nice day. It was a little tenuous this morning at the start because we had a lot of clouds up until about 9 or 10 o'clock this morning, but then it broke out wide open. And I'm just pulling up the satellite loop now, Joe. It's still fairly clear overhead. There are some high clouds starting to come up from the south, and there's also a stream of moisture running from the western Gulf of Mexico, moving up into the southern plains and heading up toward the Great Lakes. You can kind of see where this first wave that's coming out to bring the cold front through, and where all the moisture from this is going.
Yeah, and I'm calling for an increasing, thickening cloud cover after midnight tonight. And it looks like tomorrow we'll probably start off with not a whole heck of a lot of rain, but I think we'll get some light showers or light rain or maybe a bit of drizzle through about noontime tomorrow. The first raindrops arriving probably during the course of the morning commute and then continuing until about midday. But it looks like it is going to be rain, not snow in this case.
Oh yeah, in fact I got the I got the radar up right now. The wide the wide shot, and the rain that you're talking about is already moving up in patches across Ohio, Kentucky, southern Indiana, southern Illinois, kind of streaming on onto the east. And yeah, that's going to come in here tomorrow morning. It doesn't really amount to too much from eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. This will play through It'll probably help to hold the temperatures down a little bit tomorrow between whatever rain we get in the morning and then the cloud cover that's going to still be hanging on during the afternoon, and just to widen out, bring out some showers that are going on in Texas, and even some thunderstorms in the areas where they have winter storm watches up. By the way, Joe, and they also have they have thunderstorms going on right now because they're in the warm sector of this developing low that's dropping southward. So they're not quite into the cold air yet. And then over the state of Colorado, the great state of Colorado, looks like they're getting some snow in the Denver area right now. There's snow up and down the state. I forgot what interstate that is that runs north south in Colorado. Any clue?
No,
It's easy to find out. I could just pull up
and I
there's
should remember. I should remember that because for the solar
I
eclipse
want to
last.
say 15, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that's familiar. For the solar eclipse that occurred in 2017, a lot of people were wondering in Colorado how they were going to get into the totality path, and they were indeed. That was that one interstate that ran from south to north. I said could get awful heavy in terms of traffic the night before and the morning of the eclipse. I think you're right. I think it was I-15 that.
Yeah, I'm looking at their snowfall forecast map, which is so tiny I can't even see it. They usually have the interstate on that map. Let's see if I can bring it up on a wider, bigger picture here.
You know what I'm going to do, Joe? I'm just going to go to.
Take a look and see what
Well,
it is. The
I'm
north
going to go
south
to
interstate. I'm going to say 15, but they're going for 6 to 8 in Denver and 8 to
25
It's 25. Okay,
from Denver. Yeah,
I was close. Mine was on sale. 8 to 12, 8 to 12 in Boulder, 6 to 8 in Fort Collins, Winter Park, 6 to 8. So not too shabby snowfall. If you remember back in November and November and early December, this area got hit pretty hard with snowstorm after snowstorm. Kind of had an early shot of winter weather. Then it sort of calmed down for a while. So now they're getting into a bit more in the way of snow.
but didn't they just have 70-degree temperatures a couple of days
Yes,
ago?
they had record highs.
Yeah,
They had those are always fun. Record highs, to have record highs on one day and then have and then have accumulating snow with temperatures in the teens on the next. That, we had that happen here a couple of years ago, if you remember, in February
right.
when we had the all-time record highs set in a few places and temperatures in the 70s, followed by an 8 to 18-inch snowstorm the next day with temperatures in the teens and low 20s. It was fun though. I remember, we had even had thunder snow with that when that
Right.
storm got underway, as I remember correctly. So yeah, pretty Colorado getting a bit busy here. One of our regulars, Ruthless Goat, who is usually on that chat, although he hasn't been on lately, but he's keeping busy, I'm sure. So we give him a big hello. Let's take a look, Mr. Rayo. Why don't we got the new NAM coming out, and let's see how far we have of the NAM. We have out to 45 hours.
All right. Well, the Foose is not out yet, obviously, if it's only out to
Okay.
45.
But this
Uh,
at least will take us through, in the eastern part of the U.S. Actually, what I should do is I'll use the full U.S. view because we have folks that are watching from the west and are interested in that area of snow going on through Colorado because that low drops down into New Mexico, and eventually you're going to see that area of snow that's going to expand across Texas during the day on Wednesday. We have our cold front that we're going to deal with. And of course, we looks like the NAM is not really doing a good job of picking up on the rain that's on the radar. I'm noticing that the NAM has actually no precip at all in Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. And the radar, not that it's loaded, but there are some fairly large patches of rain there that the NAM's not picking up on that. But it does bring the front through here. A little bit of rain tomorrow. Front comes through early Wednesday morning, sinks southward. There's a lead low in West Virginia that actually brings some sleet and freezing rain into southern Ohio and southwest PA Wednesday morning. But that dies out. And then you've got the low that's back through Texas. Now, that's the one that moves northeastward, and that will bring in snow for I'm sorry, that's going to bring the sleet and freezing rain for eastern Pennsylvania, parts of eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England for late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning. And meanwhile, up in the Northwest, Joe, there's another system that's coming into the Pacific Northwest. Just run this backwards and into some rather cold air that's in southwestern Canada because that's where the cold air is. And they're going to see some substantial snows in part in Idaho and in western Montana as we move into later Tuesday and into Wednesday. So we'll just have to wait for the rest of the NAM to finish up here.
It almost looks like a zonal flow in a way, Tuesday into Wednesday.
Yes.
It's not necessarily something coming up from the south or coming down from the north. It almost seems like a straight west-east flow.
Well, if
Uh,
you look at bringing up the upper air, this has been a continuous continuing problem for the last month and a half. This sort of west to east fast movement of the flow. There's absolutely no blocking at all, so everything's in a big rush to move along, and that's a problem for certainly for the I-95 corridor because you can't get any cold air to hold on. It comes in, or what little there has been, it comes in and then it pulls out, and it pulls out when the storm systems arrive. You got to have that perfect timing. In the few times that we've seen snow this winter, it has come because everything has timed out perfectly between whatever cold air mass has been around and whatever upper air disturbance or shortwave trough and low pressure that goes with it. They've kind of timed out almost perfectly, and that's been it. Oh, Ruthless Goat is on. He says Wednesday morning where he is in Colorado, which is not too far from Denver. They're forecast to be at 5 below 0. So think about that. That's an 80-degree temperature swing in 48 hours. That's crazy.
how do you live out there? And this is not just unusual. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that they're pretty well used to, I think, out in Colorado. These wild temperature swings going back and forth. It's amazing.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's usually pretty dry out there. I mean, the humidity is always on the low side.
It's great, and you get this. They get this into April. I mean, I could remember the Mets at one time. They were out playing the Colorado Rockies. It was like mid-April, and they had to delay because it snowed the day before. They had to get rid of all the snow that had fallen. It is crazy.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
absolutely.
Well, just kind of bringing up, I brought up the upper air, and I really don't see much change in here. Of course, we're going to play out what's going to happen here later this week. Now, I don't know how closely you look, Joe, but there's just to go past whatever happens Thursday and Friday, there is a system that drops down in the flow.
I'm well aware of that, and
Right.
that's the one
And
for Sunday.
look, my feeling on this is pretty simple. Given the kind of winter we've had, that to get if we get something like this, from this, it's a long shot. It's going to have to, as I just said a few minutes ago, it's going to have to time out perfectly with whatever cold air is around, and there may be some, and it might even be enough, but the shortwave in and of itself is not the most impressive shortwave I've ever seen, and in fact, it kind of weakens as it moves eastward. So I'm just kind of going with the idea of a long shot chance that there might be a period of snow Saturday night into Sunday morning, and that's pretty much how I'm leaving it.
And that's what 5 days away or 6 days away. So,
Right, and of course, it's
and
also probably going to hinge on however the outcome is of the first trough. Which, if you folks take a look on the upper air, of course, here we are. It's Tuesday, and of course, we've got a ridge in the east. You're short. Somebody asked me today, which is a really good question, wondering, how come this next cold front is stalling when you don't have a block? And the thing is that the front stalling really doesn't depend on the block. The front is stalling out because it's moving into an upper ridge. You've got the upper high that is sitting off the southeast coast of the United States. So the front can only drop so far south. It has to wait for something to either push it further south or pull it back up north as a warm front. And the latter is going to happen because you've got the shortwave trough to the west. Once that swings through, and this is what brings the second wave for Thursday night into Friday, then you're going to push the frontal boundary offshore and you'll be done with it. And of course, what usually happens in those instances is that you get a wave, couple of waves that develop, and the cold air comes in after the last wave is pulled out, and after all the moisture is pulled out, so the rain just shuts off, and you don't see a flake or an ice pellet.
Right.
And that's the world we live in.
That's the world we live in. That's it. You know.
That's it. So running through, you check on the foos. I'll take everybody through the six.
I just took a look at a minute or two ago, and it's still not there. Generally, it doesn't come until about 9:30 at the earliest. But
All right. Well,
you
we're at 9:25 WCBS news time,
know.
and all right. So here's our front that comes through Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. Stalls out. You see that high, that 1024 high in upstate New York, and then of course you got that low in northern Mississippi, snow in Missouri, St. Louis, back over to Kansas City, down into eastern Oklahoma, and then eventually up to Chicago. This low goes pretty far to the left. It goes into western Ohio. Okay, the cold front backs up as a warm front, and then you get a second wave that develops here Thursday night. There's the thunderstorms that Joe's talking about from southern Maryland down all the way into Georgia. That's also where SPC's got their risk of severe weather for Thursday. And that low rides right up the coast. I think we could wind up with a couple of inches of rain out of this.
I think so too. I think so, especially from late Thursday night into the early part of Friday. We could be seeing the rain come down to beat the band, so to speak. I have a Davis weather station on a mast outside in my backyard, and I love when we get heavy duty rain. It flashes. It's raining cats and dogs.
Yes.
Sure. And it certainly does when that message appears. And I have a feeling we're going to be seeing that message come late Thursday night, early Friday.
Ruthless Goat is on, and he hit Super Chat tonight. Thank you very much, sir. Really appreciate that. Also, by the way, it looks like you might see a little bit more snow come Thursday. Not a whole lot, but there is another little disturbance that's dropping southeastward from Idaho and Montana. One of these years, I'm going to go out there. I have to experience this the central and northern Rockies as far as at least a small portion of their winter. And by the way, back in the east, of course, there is going to be this ice. You see the GFS does pick up on it for early Thursday morning. You've got sleet and freezing rain being pushed all the way up to Plattsburgh and all the way up into northern Maine. So the folks in the forecasters up in Caribou actually getting a rare opportunity to forecast rain for northern Maine. And then the second low comes by, and it's a rain changing to snow situation, and then that pulls out. And then, of course, we'll watch this weak shortwave trough. You can see the GFS does have a little low there off the North Carolina coast. It's more like an inverted trough that kind of gets kicked out to the east. It doesn't really do very much with it. Joe, you had the European for 2 runs in a row show up to a foot of snow for northern northern New Jersey, Long Island, New York City, and Connecticut. And of course, today on this afternoon's run, it barely produces a couple of tenths of an inch of snow from this system on Sunday. You got to love model consistency.
Well, this is just like I think it was the winter of 11 and 12 where the European was very high and predicting lots of big storms like 4 or 5 days in advance, and then we finally got to the storm itself, and it was just a ghost of what the European was suggesting, 4 or 5 days earlier. So this is one of those years for the European.
Let me just we'll go into SPCs. The Storm Prediction Center for tomorrow has a marginal risk of severe weather. Northern Louisiana, much of Arkansas, Northwest Mississippi, and Western Tennessee, and looks like they even have a 2% chance of tornado activity. For day 3, a slight risk of severe weather for the Florida Panhandle, southern Alabama, southeast Louisiana, marginal risk pushing further north up into Georgia, and that is a 5 to 15% on the numbers. I don't have the the tornado probability on this map. And then on their day 4 through 8, and we always say, Joe, we've said many times, when SPC's got something in that 4 to 8 day time frame in their forecast, it's probably a good idea to pay attention. And they've had this area focus for the last few days in the southeast. 15% chance of severe weather from the northern third of Florida all the way up into North Carolina.
Absolutely. And I think they're getting a little braver now because about a year or two ago, you rarely, if ever, saw anything on these maps, from 4 to 8 days. And now, over the last year or so, they've actually begun putting things on. I think they're becoming a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, they're getting a bit more confident in what.
Taking
Yeah,
a bit more initiative in the longer range.
right,
Does
right,
that this
absolutely.
does that sound good?
That sounds
Does
absolutely
that
good.
work for you?
By the way, I have a Scott Driller type piece of meteorological statistic here that you and all the snow lovers, especially out there, may be interested in. At Central Park, we
In New
have
York
had
City,
in New York City, Central Park, there have been from the 1st of November to the end of April, 118 cases or 118 dates where 10 or more inches of snow has fallen in Central Park. That's double digits, 10 or more inches. And interestingly, right now, in fact, it started today and will run until the 17th of February. Between the 3rd and the 17th of February, out of those 118 dates or 118 cases, there have been 40 that have occurred in that time frame from February 3rd to, no, excuse me, 40 such cases from the 3rd of February through the 17th of February. That means that from the 3rd of February to the 17th of February, there have been 1/3 of all the cases where 10 inches or more of snow has fallen coming during this time frame of 2 weeks from the 3rd to the 17th. It's amazing.
well,
It's
and
not a
it's
big.
and Joe, I happened the teleconnections today, because
Oh
you
God,
always go from the 3rd to the 17th.
yeah,
Okay, if we wind up with a 10-inch snowstorm with these teleconnections,
no,
okay, it will be only if the Lord Himself were to drop snowflakes down in a blanket will you get it with teleconnections
you
like
can't
this.
you can't do it with what I see on that NAO and that
It's horrible. It's
PNA.
horrible. Okay, plus 200 is a strong number. You're at plus 400 here. This is off the wall positive. That means that you have an extreme pressure change that has occurred in the North Atlantic, where you have super low pressure over a very large geographic area covering the North Atlantic, um, where you want higher pressures. And as the NAO is calculated, this is about as fast a flow as you mentioned yesterday, Joe. The Atlantic fire hose.
Yeah,
That's
the
what that
Atlantic.
is.
Yep,
It's
that's
an
it.
absolute fire hose. And the PNA, the Pacific North America Index, which briefly goes to neutral in a couple of days, goes off the wall negative, which means deep trough in the west and basically a ridge in the east. The only thing that that you have that would have to, and that goes back to what I said about having it timed perfectly. The EPO, the East Pacific Oscillation, does go strongly negative after the end of this week and through the rest of the forecast period. That means that there'll probably be some cold air across southern Canada and along the border. So what you have to hope for is that there's enough cold air that it bleeds southward, and you get it to time perfectly, and I mean perfectly, with any kind of energy that's running along in the southern stream. Because if you don't, you're not gonna you're gonna go we're gonna push it out for the next 16 days and not see any accumulating snow. And now suddenly you're running out of time.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, right now, as I just pointed out, from the 3rd to the 17th, if you're going to get a big snowfall of, let's say, 10 or more inches at Central Park, this is the time that we usually do it. Not to say that after the 17th there are no more chances. But when you chart this all out, Joe, you can see how the numbers drop precipitously beginning around the 18th. Whereas you've got days like, for example, I have on February 4th. That seems to be the magic date. That's tomorrow. Uh,
Right.
six six dates where we've had in Central Park, in the history of Central Park, 6 dates where the that have been associated with 10-inch or more snowfalls, and we still have like 3 dates or 3 times on the 17th where we've had 10 or more inches of snow. After that, I'm just looking here. You know what? After the 17th, all the dates for 10 or more inches through the rest of February and on through March, there are only like 2 dates or only 2 times. Like let's say February 13th and February 14th associated with the blizzard of 88. It has snowed 10 or more inches on those 2 dates, twice on the 13th and twice on the 14th. So that's it. This is it. It's
Yep.
if you want your big time snows, we're right smack in the midst right now, at least at Central Park of that taking place. The famous snow window. Vito Turso, who was the public relations man at the sanitation department when I was working for a private forecasting service, and we did the sanitation department for many years. He used to love that statistic where I used to say the snow window is opening February 3rd and it will stay open until the 17th. That 2 week time frame, I used to tell him if we're going to get smacked this year, that's the best chance of our getting smacked would be in that 2 week period. And we're in it right now. But as you just pointed out, this is the perfect, or maybe if you're a snow lover, the imperfect storm going against you
Right.
for possibly a major snowfall during the next couple of weeks.
Well, Reaver points out that there's, the positive NAO is not that horrible because it's keeping heating bills down. Well, yeah, to an extent. I mean, it's not the only thing. The EPO probably has a bigger influence on cold versus the NAO because the negative NAO has been so elusive over the last 8 or 9 years. It's been really more about the East Pacific oscillation that's been the driver of cold. And I just pulled up the 330 hour, which is Monday, February 17th. And here's a point in the flow where you do have a flow of air that comes down from northern Canada into the Great Lakes and into the Northeast. The problem is that once these shots of cold air that come down, and I'll just roll it back. You get these temporary setups. Here's one at the end of this week and into this weekend where you got a bit of a decent jet flow coming down out of Canada with some cold air, but that pulls out. And then you go to the trough in the west and kind of a flat zonal, west to east flow here in the east. And then you shoot out a weather system when there's probably no cold air around along about Valentine's Day. Then you get the trough and the cold air that come back for a few days, and then the trough goes back into the west again. This has been an absolutely unrelenting pattern that we have been in. It started basically back on December 19th, but it was a little different for a few weeks. It was really since maybe around January 8th or 9th that we kind of got into this pattern that's driving us now, and it shows absolutely no signs of breaking down. I wonder whether we're going to carry this right into March.
Oh, well, Joe, hope springs eternal. And if it looks like February is going to be going down the pipe or down the tube, so to speak, we could always hope that things start to change in March or even early April. It'd be so funny if this became known as the bookended winter, where we had that big storm, 20 plus inches in Albany, and much of the Northeast saw significant snows on the 1st of December. And it would be funny if we had, like around April Fool's Day, another significant snowfall with hardly anything happening in between the two. That's certainly a possibility. It has happened before, and it may very well happen again.
DJ Daniel saying that we had a flow like this back in 2014, 2015, but DJ, big difference. And the big difference is what's out in the West, okay? Because, and I'm drawing the jet here, the way it looked a lot of the time in 2014, 2015. You had a ridge in the western part of the United States up into the northwest. You had a negative East Pacific oscillation. You had a positive Pacific, PNA, Pacific North America pattern, and you had this constant, almost unbreaking, just like the pattern we're in now. The pattern we were in 14 and 15 that started in mid-January and lasted almost till the end of March was this unending cross-polar connection where we were seeing air coming from the Arctic regions across northern Canada down through into the eastern Great Lakes and into the northeastern part, into the eastern part of the United States, and particularly the northeast down into the northern Mid-Atlantic states. So there's a big difference between the jet stream that you see on the GFS at 384 hours and the jet stream pattern that we had back in 2014, 2015. And the same holds for 2013, 2014 as well. By the way, it was nothing like what we had right now. And in both those winters, there was very little, if any, blocking at all. So I've said many times, blocking is overstated. Okay, you could live with that huge positive NAO if you had everything else was the way the way I've drawn it. Okay, you could have that NAOB as positive as you want it to be. You do a lot better with a pattern like this, like we did in 14-15, but you don't have the PNA. You don't have the ridge in the west. You have a trough there, and that's not good.
I see ruthless. I see ruthless goat on the chat board here. Ain't gonna happen in the Northeast. This winter is done for you guys. Sorry. Hang up.
You know what? I listen. Maybe there'll be a very short window that you'll get these really short windows that'll try and open up. It's going to have to be perfect, and maybe Sunday is one of those windows right now. But that's it.
Yeah.
And I certainly would not. I don't say that with any degree of confidence. By the way, because it's a winter where it's not snowing. So how could you possibly be confident in your forecast, Joe? You know as well as I do. In winters where it snows a lot, it finds a way.
Right.
Those are those winters, and we said this the other day. Those are those winters where you wake up in the morning and you see 3 inches of snow, and you find it's like, where did this come from?
Right.
Yeah, that ain't going to happen this winter.
And Garo
Festus.
Vestas, he points out Memorial Day weekend, the Adirondacks got 3 feet of snow several years back. I can tell you exactly when that year was 2013. And the reason why I know that like this is that my family and I, my son had just gotten his master's degree. He is a teacher in physics at a nearby high school here. And so to celebrate, we went on a family cruise to the Bahamas. And here we were that weekend, and it was raining, and it was miserably cold. I still remember they had a comedian on board this cruise, and she was taking stock of this obviously, and she said, "All you people coming on board this beautiful cruise ship, all you people who are crying and getting all upset and bitching and moaning about the fact that it's raining, you cruise into the Bahamas for goodness sake." Meantime, I'm listening on the radio and I'm hearing just what Garrow had mentioned, that up in the Adirondacks that weekend they were getting bombed with like 2 to 3 feet of snow. This is the Memorial Day
Yeah,
weekend,
that's
and
crazy.
and I said to myself, how is this possible this late in the season, even up there? But it was possible, and they got it. And I tell you what, maybe if it were a few degrees chillier down in the New York area, we might even have seen some wet snowflakes, because a really chilly, raw weather pattern I remember as we were getting ready to kick off our 1 week vacation. So it can happen even that late in the season, I guess. We'll see how this all pans out. I wouldn't throw in the towel yet in terms of this winter season. In fact, you mentioned, Joe, sometimes it takes just a narrow or a little corridor for everything to fill in. In '83, it was an El Nino year,
Hmm.
and it was being deemed as the warmest winter in like 50 years here in the Northeast. But what happened? A cold high pressure dome built down just
Yeah,
as a wave of low pressure was coming up. What happened? Boom! We have the famous megalo
right. You'll get these little windows, and
and
that's all.
and that's all it was. That's all we needed was just that little window. And you know what? In the aftermath of that 1 to 2 feet of snow that fell with that storm. I think if you had asked anybody, um, what'd you think of the winter? In the New York metropolitan area, how'd the winter go? Statistically, you look at everything, it was a very warm winter with hardly any snow except for that one case. But because everybody was colored or biased by that one big snowstorm, oh, the winter was terrible. Oh, it was
Right,
horrible. All that
exactly.
snow, So all it takes is just
Yeah,
one little thing. That's all.
exactly. Timothy Veltman just wanted to bring up. He says, looking at some of the statistics the other night, just wanted me to tell you that 26 of the 193 warning criterias, 6 inches or more snowfalls at Central Park, occur in the first 10 days of February. So
Yeah.
clearly, this is, if you can't do it now, you ain't going to do it. so
Right.
so it is what it is. Hey, check the foos.
Wait a minute. Joe Rayo is another snow weenie, says Steve LaPont.
We're all snow weenies at heart.
I no, but
You
I,
resemble that remark.
Joe and I were super weenies back in the 70s and 80s and even maybe part of the 90s. But let me tell you something. When you end up buying a house with a long driveway and you have to do the commuting back and forth as you did, Joe, I don't
Yeah,
need to remind you of that. You tend to lose some of that enthusiasm when you hear that there's going to be a 1 or 2 foot snowfall coming up.
exactly. You want to foos? Well, but now we don't have to. At least we don't have to drive in it.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring up the NAM. The new NAM is done, so we can at least take a look at that before we wrap it up tonight. You can check
Joe, I
out the
can't believe it.
foos.
We still have. I'm still seeing. I'm still seeing the Foose run from the 18Z. So
Really?
I don't know what
Well,
it.
at least on the surface, Joe, you got everything seems to. There's not really any big change here. You've got some sleet and freezing rain at 4 a.m. on Thursday in northern New Jersey across Pennsylvania and Ohio, and of course, mostly rain as you go from West Virginia on southward. You also could start to see the low and the potential for the severe weather from Maryland down. I think SPC is going to wind up expanding that northward into possibly into southeastern Virginia in terms of the risk area, and then this big shot of rain that moves up the coast. And I agree with you also with this low tracking uh, just inland of the coast all the way up. I think there's room here that you could hear some rumbles of thunder during uh, late Thursday night, early Friday morning until the low 984 low sitting right on the central New Jersey coast. And you'll have to go way up into western New York and way up into northern New England to see any snow out of this. Although there may be some backside snow aided by a little bit of lake effect in Ohio, West Virginia, down into Kentucky, and into Western Virginia, Western North Carolina. Once the low pulls up far enough north here, at least that would be what the NAM is showing us anyway. And I don't have a real problem with that.
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe if everything moves fast enough, we'll get the heavy duty rains during the overnight on Thursday, and maybe for parts of our area, Thursday, Friday morning, people wake up to bright sunshine. But that's a mock clearing or a hole, so to speak, because I have a feeling that once we get into the midday and afternoon on Friday, we're going to see everything cloud back over again with a gusty wind and maybe a couple of lingering or leftover showers. But the main thrust is going to come during Thursday night, I think, with the potential for heavy duty rain. And as again we mentioned, maybe some rumbles of thunder. We probably are not going to get into the severe area as
I don't think it'll be
I guess
severe, but I think certainly the rain will be.
the general thunderstorm coverage may very well reach up into our area on Thursday night.
Okay, so I had a Timothy also uh, passing me Scott Briller's Jeopardy question. Um, February 9th, 1934.
Oh, that's the coldest day in New York at Central Park, 15 below zero,
There it
right?
is. Yep.
Yeah,
January 23rd, 1961.
January 23rd, 1961. Wasn't that the 21 or 22 below at Brookhaven?
Yep. Or January 22nd.
Yeah.
Something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Under
Yeah, it
heat.
was 20. That's the one, I'm living out here for the last 30 some odd years. I have seen just about every major record broken. Snowiest months, snowiest seasons, least snowiest seasons, Um, you name it, I've seen it. I've also seen as low at my house, as low as minus 9, and I that's the one record I wanted, and I know how it when you look back at how it happened because that happened after the inauguration day snowstorm
Right.
in 1961. So there was a really deep snow cover. That was the second of three big snowstorms that year. There was really deep snow cover. There must have been a northeast wind, a northeast wind that blowing down from eastern Canada that set it up, and then we had massive radiational cooling, perhaps a day or two later, and you wound up getting down to like 22, 23 degrees below zero. That's the one temperature that that's the one record I would like to have seen broken here and haven't seen. I would like to experience that. I saw West Hampton at one in the last couple of years on one night. I think got down to 18 below zero, but not the 23.
There was one night you and I were working at FiOS One News, and we were amazed because West Hampton was so much colder than so many other places on Long Island, even up in the Hudson Valley. It was an amazing differentiation between what they had versus what everybody else had. I got to tell you, they radiate like no other
Oh,
place.
it's crazy.
They're crazy. Yeah.
South Jersey's the same. In the Pine Barren areas, you go down to Central and South Jersey, it also radiates like mad down there. When there's a deep snow cover, if you look at some of the lows, if you go back to, I believe it was January of 14, in late February, early March, I mean, they had temperatures down there like -10, -7. They were getting down to minus double digits in the morning down in Millville. I mean, it was crazy, but they had snow cover, deep snow cover, and I guess ideal radiational cooling conditions. Um, yeah, it can get crazy cold here under certain circumstances.
Your old friend, and I was acquainted with him too, Don Thompson at Noyak out in eastern Long Island, who used to complain bitterly to the National Weather Service when they were based at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. And back then, Rockefeller Plaza, the meteorologist simply said, colder inland. They never really accounted for Long Island being a place where the temperatures were, low or
Right.
got low. And he used to complain about the fact, like, it's 2 below 0 out here, and you're only going for a low of 10, or that kind of thing. And they never listened. But then, back in the late '90s or whenever it was, when they left Rockefeller Plaza and set up shop where they are right now at Upton, New York, that's when they experienced and that's when they saw for themselves that everything that Don Thompson was telling them all those years before was absolutely true.
Bill Uber, you're right. If this pattern continues, early fishing, I actually have thought about it, so it is on my mind. All right, coming up, Joe. It's 9:54. I think we can wrap it up. So tomorrow we'll be back to our usual time, 7 o'clock Eastern.
7 o'clock Eastern tomorrow night. And incidentally, I mentioned it a few times before, but I'll mention it again tomorrow morning. Well, tomorrow afternoon, of course, those of you who have a chance can go to Joe's talk at Sachem Library. But at 11:04 a.m. tomorrow, the exact midpoint of the winter season will be halfway between the winter solstice and the vernal equinox in March. So after 11:04 tomorrow, we're going to be a lot closer to the astronomical start of spring as opposed to the astronomical beginning of winter.
And that's it. So everybody, come on out to Sachem Library, Holbrook, New York, 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon for a solid hour of weather talk, and hope to see you there. In the meantime, Joe and I will be back tomorrow night at 7 at our regular time, right here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is drawing huge ratings, by the way. We're beating, CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox, the whole 9 yards.
You know, don't kid
Just
yourself, Joe.
crushing. We're just crushing them.
We're looking, at how many people are watching now, or how many people have signed on the chat board. But I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there who have watched us and have heard about us, and I think we're honestly growing a significant audience. in
Yeah.
my humble opinion.
Oh, yeah. By the way, Joe Rayo Weather, for those of you who haven't subscribed to Joe Rayo's YouTube channel, there is Joe Rayo Weather, so be sure that you've subscribed to both of our channels. And if you're on my weather app, when Joe does his short fuse update, if you miss it, you can watch it off of the meteorologist Joe Chaffee weather app, because I'm putting Joe's short fuse update on the video portion of the app. So another good reason for you to have the free Joe Chaffee meteorologist Joe Chaffee weather app.
And I greatly appreciate that, Joe, except I didn't do a short fused update because there really wasn't much to update because
Oh, I
the
know.
man's
Well,
weather.
when you do them, let me know, and
I will.
we'll share the info.
I will do that.
All right, pal. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night, everybody. Thanks again for being here. Good night.
Night night.